Alright, I'm getting a nice melt on this glass. I'm going to make a bead using Latticino. My matrix here is pink. And I'm going to make what I call a pendant bead. Another very useful shape. Make a pendant bead, set it with a little silver, using my wire techniques, or using the wire techniques, and you've got a nice little piece of jewellery. So you're simply going to pour it onto the mandrel a different way. Of course, for every different shape that you're going to work. So for this one, you're going to have a nice solid base. Let's see if I can take it out there. And you're going to wind it up the mandrel and taper it off at the top. Now it almost looks like a shell, doesn't it? That's another pretty design, and that's really actually how you make some shell beads. And I'm going to go merrily on applying the rest of this glass. Yes. Ooh, it's like taffy. And I left a piece on the end of this clear rod to make sure that I'm not mixing the two kinds of glass. Make sure your hole at the top is even. I'm going to show you a little trick now. If the hole in your top of your bead isn't exactly right, you can actually rework it with a point of metal by just taking some glass and just running it smoothly around the top. You can actually readjust that hole. It's a useful little trick, actually. Alright. Bead like this takes a certain amount of graphite paddle work, but you want to have it pretty balanced before you start. The funny thing about tools, we all kind of are inclined to collect them, and every time a new one comes out, I succumb to the temptation to buy it. But this paddle here was my very first one, and it's still my absolute favorite. It's such an old friend. It isn't fine quality graphite or anything, but it's perfect with its little old wooden handle all burnt up, and I've taken it to England and used it. If I didn't have any other paddle except this one, for this kind of work I'd do just fine. So there's my basic bead, and now we're going to go for the Latticino application. You need to have a strong enough flame to melt the Latticino at a reasonable speed, but not so hard that it will break it. Actually, a little less. There we go. If there's any air in your Latticino, it'll stop popping at this point and jumping all over the place. You just feed it through the flame and onto your bead. nice and easy. Pop into the beginning of the latticino every now and then to make sure it's adhering properly. And just roll it up your bead like that, and then gradually take it off. Now you can add more heat. And watch it melt in. Make sure that top is nice and even. And you still have to make sure that your bead is nice and centered, of course. Once it melts in, you can reshape your bead. Now there's lots of other things I could do with this. I could put dots between the latticino. I could actually drag it all the way through. I'm sure lots of you are familiar with that technique, so you get a sort of a houndstooth effect all the way up the bead. I just wanted to show you how to use your latticino for a simple but classy bead. There's one little thing that I always like to do. I don't like to see the beginning and the end of the latticino just kind of start and finish. So I go in and just visit the top and give it a little twist so that it has a flourish to it. And again down here. Give a little flourish. And where the flourish is, I sometimes like to just leave it not too flattened in, just so that it looks like a little curl in the glass. Just mellow it out, but that's it. There we are. There we are.